And Trump spent Easter Sunday threatening to blow up Iran's power plants and bridges. By Tuesday morning, escalated to warning that a whole civilization will die tonight, and then hours later took a ceasefire off-ramp. The story here is that he used apocalyptic brinksmanship against a civilian population, which is a war crime, by the way, to bludgeon his way toward a pause in a war that he suddenly needed to stop for political reasons.
Republicans have a tendency to wrap themselves in God, especially when it comes time to wars. But I think the long-term strategy here is he's clearly either trying to get more Republican votes and trying to shore up that Christian conservative base, or they're just a cult, and it might be both in this case. It's going to cause problems because the middle is going to leave, and a lot of those Christian conservatives, they're looking at this and saying, you should not go this far, and I think you're starting to lose some votes over a lot of this stuff.
I will say that it's a bad sign for Republicans when the clearest moral voice on this is coming from Tucker Carlson, who's one of the few prominent Republican voices to directly call out what Trump was saying on Easter morning of all times. Trump went from blasphemy to barbarism to backpedaling in about 48 hours. The ceasefire is, of course, not holding initially. There are still good outcomes that could come from this Iran war, but so far we haven't seen any, and it is a complete strategic mess. This isn't strategy. It was panic with bombers attached.
There's a story out there that the Pentagon allegedly threatened the Vatican with military force, and they had to ask J.D. Vance, who has his new book out there about converting to Catholicism. When he said he's going to look into it, they also asked him why he was in Hungary campaigning for Viktor Orban. Matt, what the hell is J.D. Vance up to nowadays?
When Barack Obama was elected, The Onion ran a wonderful headline that said, America gives worst job to black man. And essentially, J.D. Vance is doing the 2020s version of that. It seems like all the worst jobs in the Trump administration have been handed to J.D. Vance in the last week. And oddly, J.D. Vance has the job of going to support Orban, support Putin, really, at the same time that Trump is shoving a spike into the heart of NATO, and at the same time that U.S. representatives are delivering ham-handed threats to the Vatican, basically saying to the Pope Leo, get in line, do what we say, or else. And J.D. Vance is sent in to clean that up. In the meantime, there's this huge expose in the New York Times talking about the planning that went into planning. That went into the decision to go to war with Iran. And J.D. Vance is like sweatily all over this, kind of saying, well, this is obviously stupid and it might end my dreams of becoming president, but I'm with you, sir. Whatever you say, thank you, sir. May I have another? He is on the hottest of hot seats right now.
As vice president, J.D. Vance is doing a good job because he is doing exactly what the president wants him to do. But what that means is when the shit hits the fan, when the bomb blows up, the shrapnel is going to land squarely on him, but he has to walk along and kiss Trump's ass along the way because that is the job of the vice president. And he is going to fall just like Mike Pence had a problem, just like Pam Bondi, just like everybody else in this administration. It's just going to blow up in their face.
The story of this next issue that's just emerged, a deep dive report from Politico, laying out the full-on knife fight that's underway to become Trump's next attorney general. And it's not really about that job per se. It's about which faction of Trump world gets control of the Justice Department and the MAGA agenda at a time when their entire approach to justice is under siege. They're losing prosecutors from DOJ, and they're facing a credibility crisis. There are several contenders, Harmeet Dillon, Todd Blanche, Jeanine Pirro, Lee Zeldin, Ed Martin, that represent different factions and different emphasis in the MAGA coalition.
First of all, nobody should want this job. This job is not going to end well for whoever. Look, the most qualified of that list, Dillon. Who probably gets it, Pirro or Ed Martin. What it really is, Trump wants someone who can go on TV and drive home the message and defend him at every turn, but do it in a way that makes sense. That's why I think Pirro should be the one that everybody thinks is going to happen. Ed Martin couldn't really even make his way through his first round of whatever he was appointed to and presidential appointments. Quite frankly, is nowhere qualified for it. And I should disclose right here, I've known Ed Martin for a very long time, and I will tell you he is nowhere qualified to be the United States Attorney General. But it is really
like these.
Exactly. But it's a horrible job under Trump world, because your job is to dismantle institutions, to go on political witch hunts, and it is not what a true attorney general is meant to do. And that's why I think, like Dylan, she is smart, she's capable. Bondi, to some extent, had a background here that she had been Florida attorney general, could have done this job, and she failed miserably. I think the best person who could be attorney general would be Saul Goodman from Breaking Bad, but it's probably going to be Pirro.
This doesn't seem to be a career test. It seems to be an IQ test. The smartest among these will try to duck out of this because they have to be thinking forward in a strategic way about what their career will be left as after Trump. Pam Bondi's career is done. She has no other future professional existence outside of Trump circles. She has completely beclowned herself from any other legitimate enterprise in American life. And the smartest among that list, or perhaps other candidates, will see that and will try to back away slowly.
April has a lot of special elections, and this week we saw two of them. We saw in Wisconsin for a race for Supreme Court, the Democrat just dominated. And in Georgia, the race to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican won in this ruby red district, but the Democrat really performed.
This week was a turning point as far as Democratic insiders are concerned. We actually have hard receipts that the wave that's been building all year toward the 2026 midterms is reaching absolute tsunami levels. What we've seen so far in special elections is an average 11-point swing from Republicans to Democrats. These two races this past week in very different places politically had an average swing of 25 points toward Democrats. That is absolutely massive. You pair it with some new research from Elliot Morris showing that Trump's approval is below 45% in 44 current Republican-held congressional districts, including some deep red areas. This is your base. They are saying we are ripshit with what is happening right now. This is the week where we saw some real-world examples of just how far this might go. And the upshot is something you've actually been predicting for months now, and I've been more reluctant to get onto it because I'm a Democrat, and so I'm afraid to hope. I'm always sure that we're going to fumble this at the goal line, but you're seeing insiders starting to take a serious look at the Senate race in Ohio, Sherrod Brown, the Senate race in North Carolina, Roy Cooper, ultra strong Democratic candidates that were kind of written off as being in tough territory. If those two races are on the board, then now the Senate is in play. And that's a serious threat to Trump's future and to the whole Republican Party. Republicans should be pretty nervous right now.
Don't forget, you got the Alaska race that I think is actually within range for Democrats to pick up as well. Everything looks like a wave in April. And Republicans, because I have these conversations, we are deeply worried about what's coming. We are deeply worried about how to mitigate it. That's why you saw redistricting. Right now, they are trying everything at the White House to stop this, because if Democrats win the Senate, which I actually still think they're going to, Trump gets impeached, definitely from the House, and who knows what happens in the Senate if he gets removed for office. Marjorie Taylor Greene was talking about the 25th Amendment today. That's how nervous Republicans are, because they see the writing on the wall. They know what's coming.
As the war with Iran seems to be on sort of a temporary pause, the question has come roaring back. What is in those Epstein files anyway? There have been jokes flying around from comedians about how the Strait of Hormuz opening is allowing container ships full of Epstein files to go flowing back to media sources. And there's been speculation all along that this war with Iran has been the ultimate wag the dog exercise. Joe Rogan actually said that quiet part out loud on his show this week, invoking the example of Bill Clinton and some bombings in other countries, and saying this war with Iran is essentially the quintessential example of wag the dog, that this has all been motivated as a distraction from the Epstein files. But they are back. And now Pam Bondi, she's like zombie being dragged back on. You got to double kill zombies. She's being dragged back, subpoenaed to appear in Congress as part of the inquiry into the Epstein files. She's refused to comply. There's a contempt of Congress brewing against her.
We've all long speculated that the war was 100% to distract. I think even firing Bondi, it was hoping that would kill it because Blanche wasn't going to release it. Members of Congress are not going to let this go. The American public wants to know about this. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think you see in this voter distrust of what's happening in government. You're middle of the road. Your swing voters think there's something here. They think there's something being hidden. They think government is lying to them. And they think Trump is all part of that, which is why people like Nancy Mace is trying to continue to push this down the road, because she sees it when she's talking to voters. She knows this is a real question. She knows this is a real concern. And for Republicans, we are not going to win women voters who make up 51% of the vote if it feels like we're protecting a pedophile. And so what's going on here is, now that the war it seems to be gone out there, this issue is back. It's not going to go away. No matter how much Donald Trump tries, no matter who's his attorney general, this is here to stay.